Kellan Dorsey had been on Ganymede Base 12 for 11 days when his fever spiked to 104. He chalked it up to the local atmosphere denser than Earth's, with an odd chemical composition that made even filtered air taste like burnt metal. But when the muscle spasms started in his left arm and he vomited twice in the span of 10 minutes, something told him this wasn't jet lag. He stumbled into the medbay clutching his ribs, sweat pooling at his collarbone. The sterile white walls swirled in and out of focus. A tall alien with translucent lime skin and a long neck twisted toward him. Its name tag blinked in 3 languages. It preferred to be called Dr. Vel. "You are shivering," Vel observed, voice flat like paper rubbing against glass. "No kidding," Kellan managed. "I think I caught something." Vel scanned him with a wand-like device, its blue light flickering over Kellan's torso, limbs, and skull. "Your vitals are destabilizing, internal temperature rising rapidly. Blood oxygen is low." "You're infected." "Yeah, I kinda figured that part," Kellan said, dropping onto the exam bed. "So give me something. Antibiotics, antivirals, I don't care if it tastes like motor oil." Vel tilted its head. "There is no known treatment." "You have contracted strain 7 from the Juno bloom spores released in Sector 3 last week. Fatal to over 93% of infected within 72 Earth hours. I will begin comfort protocols." Kellan blinked. "Wait, what do you mean comfort protocols?" "You're saying I'm just gonna die. That is the statistical outcome. You're not going to even try something. There is no cure." Kellan sat up too fast and almost passed out. "Then try something that isn't a cure. I don't know, Tylenol, ibuprofen, saline, anything." Vel paused. "Those are not recognized as effective treatments for this infection." "Yeah, but they're effective for humans. I've had worse flus. Just let me take something to get the fever down." "You misunderstand. This pathogen destroys neural pathways, immune response, and organ cohesion. Symptom suppression will not prevent fatality." Kellan looked at the alien and realized it wasn't being cruel, it just didn't see the point. It came from a species where medicine was exact, mathematical. Either it worked or it didn't. There was no in-between. Humans didn't work like that. They threw stuff at the wall until something stuck. They survived off stubbornness and aspirin. "Fine," Kellan muttered. "Then let me go back to my quarters. You should remain under observation. You just told me I'm a dead man. Let me at least die on my own mattress." Vel stared. "You insist?" "Yeah, I insist." Vel handed him a small sensor patch. "Place this on your chest. It will transmit vitals for the next 48 hours. Post-mortem data will assist future research." "Fantastic," Kellan said and staggered out, holding onto the wall for support. Back in his quarters, he collapsed onto the cot and fumbled through his med kit. He still had a few Earth-standard painkillers and anti-inflammatories, not much, just the basics. Acetaminophen, electrolyte packs, an old-fashioned thermometer. He popped 2 pills and sipped water until his stomach stopped twisting. The next 12 hours were hell. He hallucinated. He couldn't hold down food. His muscles locked up in spasms so violent he bit the inside of his cheek until it bled. But he kept drinking, kept swallowing pills on schedule, kept wiping sweat from his brow with the hem of his shirt. He didn't expect it to work. But he wasn't going to let some alien tell him to lie down and give up. The fever broke on hour 13. It didn't vanish. It just lessened. Enough for him to sit upright without wanting to scream. He checked his pulse, still high, breathing shallow, but he wasn't dying. Not yet. By hour 20 he was able to stand and walk to the sink. His legs trembled. His reflection looked awful: gray skin, sunken eyes, lips cracked, but alive. He dragged himself back to medbay. Vel looked up, surprised. "You are ambulatory?" "Yeah, I'm not dead." The alien scanned him again. "Neural degradation has ceased. Organ function stabilizing. This is statistically impossible." Kellan leaned on the counter. "I took Tylenol, drank water." "Got some rest, you know, basic human stuff." "That is not a treatment protocol." "It is now." Vel blinked slowly. "I must report this anomaly." "Sure," Kellan said. "Report away." But next time you tell someone they're going to die, maybe also give them a Tylenol. Just in case. The next day, he was back in bed, still weak but improving. He kept a log of his vitals, took his meds on time, and forced himself to eat despite the nausea. Vel visited twice, bringing more advanced instruments, running tests silently. It no longer spoke of death. By day 6, Kellan was walking the halls again. Still pale but upright, rumors spread. The guy who survived the fatal infection, the human who beat the Juno bloom. Other species began stopping him in the corridors, asking what he'd done, what treatment he'd used. Kellan always said the same thing. Basic medicine, persistence, and being too damn stubborn to die. Vel approached him in the cafeteria. The station's medical council has reviewed your case. They request a full report on your treatment timeline and response. Kellan set down his tray. You're serious? Yes. Your recovery is the only recorded survival of strain 7. It is now under reevaluation. He laughed once, short and hoarse. So now it counts. It does. Back in medbay, Vel recorded his statements while Kellan recounted each day, each pill, each symptom. The alien listened without interruption. You do not possess advanced biochemical agents, Vel said finally. Your methods were unsophisticated. Yeah, but they worked. I do not understand how, Kellan shrugged. We don't always understand our own crap either, but when something works, we keep doing it. Vel fell quiet. Then, would you be willing to oversee a trial of your method on another infected subject? Kellan hesitated. You have another case, arriving tomorrow. Same strain, he nodded. Yeah, I'll help. The next day, a young technician from the mining sector arrived, barely conscious. Kellan supervised while Vel administered hydration and fever reducers reluctantly, as if still unsure it was worth trying. 3 days later, the technician sat up and asked for soup. Vel stood beside Kellan, silent. Kellan crossed his arms. Still think it's not medicine? I will revise my protocols. The infection wasn't cured, but it wasn't fatal anymore, not automatically, not to humans. Not if they fought it 1 fevered hour at a time. Word spread beyond the station. Earth's basic symptom management was incorporated into the interspecies database. Not because it was high-tech, but because it worked, and Kellan Dorsey, the man who beat the unbeatable with a bottle of pills and a stubborn will to live, went back to work. He didn't call himself a hero. He didn't want to be one. He just wanted to finish his contract and go home. But from that day on, when an alien doctor said something was statistically fatal, someone would always ask, yeah, but did you try what the human did? And sometimes they did, and people lived. By the afternoon of the technician's recovery, Kellan was back in the medbay, leaning against the stainless edge of a diagnostics table, biting into a protein bar with all the enthusiasm of someone chewing carpet. Vel stood nearby, arms folded inward in that odd, mantis-like posture its species defaulted to when perplexed. This isn't a comfortable environment, Kellan muttered, glancing up at the overhead lights that pulsed softly every few seconds, rhythmically irritating. This facility is optimized for sterile function, not comfort, Vel replied. You may relocate if it impedes your recovery. I'm fine. Just saying, maybe if you added a chair that doesn't feel like a metal slab or, God forbid, a potted plant, people wouldn't dread coming in here. Potted flora would be a contamination risk. Only if you water it with acid, Kellan said, wiping crumbs onto his jumpsuit. Which, knowing you guys, wouldn't surprise me. Vel didn't blink, its species didn't, but its second eyelid flicked across both orbs in what Kellan had learned to interpret as annoyance. The technician, a lanky, blue-tinted being from the outer moons named Renal, had spent most of the morning sitting up in bed, sipping broth and watching Kellan with quiet fascination. Kellan had tried waving once, then gave up when Renal simply stared back like he was a walking paradox. You're wondering how I'm conscious, Kellan said aloud, not looking up from his food. I am wondering why your species continues to survive, Renal answered, his accent thick and wavering like a flute played underwater. Kellan chuckled, finishing the last bite. Yeah, we wonder that too. Vel turned toward Kellan, holding up a thin tablet-like device. I have compiled the preliminary biochemistry data from your recovery process. It remains inconclusive. The compounds ingested are not inherently antiviral. I told you, Kellan said, brushing his hands off. They don't kill the virus. They just help us hang on long enough to fight it off. You prolonged your systemic functions through indirect metabolic support, Vel said slowly, as though the concept offended its sensibilities. Exactly. That's the trick. We don't always kill the thing, we just refuse to die from it. Vel stared at the tablet. This is inefficient. It's human. That evening, the station's council sent a representative to the medbay. She was from the Nevral species porous skin, 4 short arms, and a voice like a wind chime caught in a hurricane. Her name was Lyra. She wore a badge shaped like a spiral. I reviewed the footage, she said as soon as she entered. You were visibly convulsing for several hours. Kellan, now sitting on a stool beside the diagnostics console, looked up. Yeah, and you did not request additional support. Didn't know I could. You could have been placed in cryostasis. For a fever, Kellan raised an eyebrow. You people freeze someone because they get the chills. If the prognosis is terminal, yes. He rubbed the back of his neck. Well, lucky I didn't. Lyra circled him slowly, scanning him with a handheld orb that hummed softly. You are now considered of high research value. I have submitted a recommendation for your biological processes to be studied further. Hold on, Kellan said, standing up. I'm not signing up for invasive tests. No needles will be used without your consent, Lyra said. We will begin with observational analysis during controlled exposure to stress factors. You mean you're going to stress me out on purpose, only mildly? Yeah, that's not comforting. Vel stepped between them. He is not a lab subject. Lyra tilted her head. Your tone suggests emotional investment. I am invested in data integrity. Uncontrolled variables during recovery must not be compromised. Kellan backed toward the nearest exit. Look, if this turns into a poking and prodding situation, I'm gone. I didn't survive this thing to become someone's petri dish. Lyra dipped her head once. The council will send a formal request. You may decline. He left the medbay 10 minutes later and headed straight for the mess hall. By the following day, word had spread further. A group of engineering interns cornered him outside the lift terminal, holding various scanners and data pads. One of them, a short humanoid with 6 rotating pupils, asked if they could measure his lung capacity. Another asked for a saliva sample. Kellan declined both, citing a strict no spitting on strangers policy. He found Renal later in the medbay, sitting up and tapping on a screen, attempting to mimic Earth-style typing. The alien looked up as he approached. Your language lacks symmetry, Renal said. So do most of our buildings, Kellan replied. We like things messy? I have noticed. Renal gestured to the display where a crude diagram showed the human immune system. Your species' defense relies on chaotic swarm responses. Redundancy, it is. Inelegant, like I said. Messy? It appears to be working. Kellan sat down across from him. That's the thing about humans. We're not built to be elegant. We're built to bounce back. Renal considered that. I believe your people are difficult to categorize. We get that a lot. Later in the week, Vel invited Kellan to observe a training seminar for the station's medical staff. Curious and a little flattered, Kellan agreed. The room was a wide chamber with tiered seating and a projection dome overhead. Most of the audience was alien shapes and colors he still couldn't name. Only 2 other humans were present, both stationed in a different sector and equally surprised to see him. The presentation began with a rotating model of the virus. Vel narrated, explaining the infection's cellular mechanics. Then, unexpectedly, the display shifted to a thermal image of Kellan during his illness. He winced. This is the subject, Vel said, during the acute phase. Several beings in the audience made low, pulsing sounds of recognition or horror, he couldn't tell. Through non-specific pharmacological agents and persistent hydration, the subject's body maintained operational function long enough for adaptive immune response to activate. The treatment was not targeted. It was, in human terms, supportive. A four-eyed reptilian leaned forward. "You mean he guessed?" Kellan stood. "No, I knew I had to keep myself from crashing long enough for my system to do the rest. It wasn't a guess, it was basic survival." A different alien, this one covered in fine silver fur, raised a hand. "You endured organ destabilization and hallucinations without sedation. Why?" "Because if I went unconscious, I wouldn't be able to keep treating myself. I had to be awake to keep going." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Vel added, "This behavior is considered typical of human response under pressure. Their threshold for pain and cognitive dissonance is unusually elevated." Kellan scratched his head. "We're not superhuman or anything. We just have a really strong aversion to giving up." An amphibious speaker with a glistening jaw leaned in. "Would your species consider this method repeatable?" "Depends on the person," Kellan said. "Some people panic, some fight through, but the method, yeah, it's what we do back home. Support the body. Let it do the work." The seminar ended with several beings taking notes using various methods: holograms, tactile pads, even one that appeared to write by exhaling ink onto a sheet of breathable film. Afterward, Vel walked with Kellan back toward his quarters. "You have changed the station's protocol catalog," Vel said. "I just got sick and didn't die." "That is a significant alteration to prior expectations." Kellan rubbed his eyes. "I'm not used to being this interesting. I usually just fix comms arrays and get yelled at when they go down. You are now considered an interdisciplinary case study." "Great," he muttered. "I've become homework." Vel paused outside his door. "Your species is, by all statistical models, inefficient, yet it persists." "That contradiction is compelling." Kellan gave a tired grin. "We're full of contradictions, get used to it." Vel nodded once. "I am beginning to." Inside his quarters, he dropped onto the cot and stared at the ceiling. He hadn't asked to be anyone's example. But if his miserable 3-day fever trip helped someone else live, maybe it wasn't all wasted. Still, he made a mental note to ask for hazard pay. Or at least a chair with a backrest. Kellan sat on the edge of the observation deck, legs dangling over the low safety barrier, a warm mug of synthetic coffee balanced in both hands. Through the thick glass dome, Ganymede's cracked ice surface stretched out in pale ridges, a quiet, frozen wasteland beneath the station's soft amber glow. He hadn't been up here since arriving. Frankly, he didn't think he'd live long enough to bother. Behind him, the faint whir of the internal doors signaled someone entering. He didn't turn around. "I understand the beverage is not nutritional," said a familiar voice. "Yet you consume it daily." "It's not about nutrition," Kellan said without looking back. "It's about not throttling someone before noon." He heard Vel shift closer, the alien's long limbs moving with the careful grace of someone who had studied human posture but never quite mastered it. "I have reviewed the full history of caffeine use in your species. It appears to be both a stimulant and a ritual." "You're not wrong," Kellan said, sipping. "We like small comforts. Even if they don't fix the problem, they make it easier to face." Vel paused. "Is that why you continued treatment despite the projected outcome?" Kellan leaned back slightly, the mug warm against his chest. "I didn't have a choice. Dying in a med bay while someone took notes wasn't how I wanted to go. You did not appear concerned with legacy. Because I'm not. I came here to do a job, not to be remembered. That is statistically uncommon in subjects who survive terminal diagnoses." Kellan finally glanced over. "You run into a lot of people who survive terminal diagnoses." Vel blinked once. "No. This is my first." Kellan laughed quietly, then stood and walked back toward the interior. "Well then, guess you're not batting zero anymore." They walked the corridor in silence until they reached a junction near the hydroponics wing. Vel stopped. "I have a request," it said. "Unrelated to your health." Kellan raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear it." There is a new intake of junior medical interns arriving tomorrow. They are unfamiliar with human biology. I would like you to speak with them." He frowned. "I'm not a doctor. You are a case study. I'm not a teacher either. You are the only reason we are revising our infectious disease protocols." Kellan rubbed his face. "You want me to explain how to survive by being miserable and stubborn. I want you to explain how you knew what to do." "Fine," he said, exhaling. "But I'm not putting on a lab coat." The next day, Kellan found himself standing in the auxiliary diagnostics lab in front of 7 interns, each from a different species. None looked older than 20 in whatever units they used. One had gills, another had what appeared to be rotating ears. Most stood too close together and stared too hard. He cleared his throat. "All right, so you've probably read the report. I got infected with something nasty and didn't die. Big surprise, but what you didn't see in the report is that I didn't do anything fancy. I used what I had." The one with the rotating ears raised a hand. "You ingested chemical agents not designed for the pathogen. Why?" "Because they helped me feel less like I was dying. The goal wasn't to kill the virus. It was to make my body strong enough to keep fighting it." A tall, feathered intern tilted their head. "You mean the treatment was not targeted?" "Nope. It was support. Hydration, fever control, rest. Think of it like reinforcing a wall while a storm hits. You're not stopping the wind, but you stop the house from falling down." Another, with a smooth, reflective faceplate, asked, "How did you determine dosage without cross-referencing our pharmacological database?" "Because I've been sick before. I knew what my body could handle. I used what we bring on every mission. You don't need to reinvent medicine every time. Sometimes you just need to apply it properly." They scribbled notes on various glowing surfaces. Kellan watched them for a moment before continuing. "You've got all this tech. Scanners, real-time simulations, predictive models. That's great. But don't let it stop you from treating the basics. If someone's burning up, bring down the fever. If they're dehydrated, give fluids. Don't wait for a miracle, do something." The guild intern looked up. "But statistically," "Yeah, I know. Statistically, I should be dead. But biology isn't stats, it's a mess. Sometimes the mess wins." Vel stood silently in one corner, observing. After the session, as the interns dispersed in a quiet flurry of limbs and light, Vel approached. "I believe your presence was instructive." "I'd hope so. I'm not doing that again," Kellan said, stretching his arms. "One lecture's enough for a lifetime. You spoke without reference materials." "I lived it," he said. "Didn't need slides." Later that week, the technician Renal, now fully recovered, invited Kellan to a small gathering in the recreational wing. Apparently, it was customary among his species to host a shared sensory experience as a gesture of gratitude. Kellan, unsure what that meant, brought a sealed bag of peanut clusters. The room was dark, with a soft hum in the floor panels. Renal stood in the center, surrounded by small floating globes that emitted gentle pulses of color and sound. He motioned for Kellan to sit. "This is a memory chamber," Renal said. "A place to relive moments through shared perception." Kellan hesitated. "You're not going to plug something into my brain, are you?" "No." "Just listen." The globes began to swirl, releasing a low harmonic tone, followed by a gentle scent like rain evaporating off stone. Kellan closed his eyes. For a moment, he felt not sight or sound, but a sensation of warmth rising against a tide of cold. The feeling of clinging to life, not as an act of heroism but necessity. When he opened his eyes again, Renal was watching him. "You endured alone," he said. "That is rare." "I didn't want to, but nobody else knew what to do. You do now." Kellan nodded slowly. "Yeah. I guess I do." Back in his quarters that night, he packed his bag. His contract was nearly up and the station had already requested his extension twice. He declined both. He wasn't interested in being a symbol or a consultant. He wanted gravity again. Trees. Rain that didn't need to be manufactured. A soft chime came from his door. Vel entered without preamble. "You are departing tomorrow." "Yep." I have compiled a revised medical entry based on your case. It includes human baseline symptom management protocols. It is already being distributed to high-risk outposts. Kellan zipped his pack. Good, maybe next time someone won't have to figure it out the hard way. Vel hesitated. You have altered our understanding of viability thresholds. Glad I could help. I'll send you more Tylenol if you're low. I have requisitioned a shipment. Kellan grinned and slung the bag over his shoulder. Then you're officially ready for anything. At 0900 the next morning, he boarded the outbound shuttle. The medbay didn't look different as they passed it on the way to the docking port, still sterile, still too bright. But now, tucked into the corner by the supply locker, someone had planted a small green fern, probably a joke, but a good one. As the shuttle lifted off, Kellan watched the ice fields fall away beneath them. Ganymede shrank into the void. He didn't wave. No one did that in real life. But somewhere on that frozen moon, a bunch of aliens had learned that sometimes survival wasn't about the right drug or the perfect scan. Sometimes it was about the guy who refused to quit, even when the statistics said he would. And that was enough.